Hello there, mate. The three biggest Doctor Who monsters on constant rotation throughout 60.5 years of our favourite show are the Daleks, the Cybermen and the Master. Then you have a second wave of occasionally returning monsters like the Sontarans, Silurians, Sea Devils and other monsters probably beginning with S. Spare a thought though for those awesome monsters who only get to wreak havoc once in Doctor Who, never to return again. On TV, that is. Obviously even the third Bandril on the left gets his own Big Finish series. So let me run you through the top 10 greatest single-serving Doctor Who monsters from the 4th Doctor's era. At the end of this video, I will reveal the number 1 all-time greatest, and then you can drop your list down in comments. Let's go one off wild. Can you tell which monster is in the number 10 spot purely from this still? It's Scaroth of the Jaggeroth. Yes, the star of City of Death. Now, this is the kind of monster that only appears once in the show, but will be remembered by generations to come, mainly because there's a kind of a shorthand for what he looks like. Now, look at this. He pulls his face clean off to reveal an alien whose face is just a load of worms. Now, the impact of this was pretty damn strong back in 1979 when City of Death was broadcast, ensuring that the Jaggeroth would be remembered. But besides being a scary bug-eyed monster, the strength of the Jaggeroth is that he can pose as a posh count and verbally parry with the Doctor. That makes him a lot more interesting. You know, the Doctor can have a conversation with him. He's not just shuffling along a corridor. Although there's nothing wrong with shuffling along a corridor, and as we'll see, there are plenty of monsters in this list who do just that. Oh, and speaking of which, at number 9 we have Mandrills. Now, Mandrills are quite a derided monster in Doctor Who. They're kind of often used as the epitome of generic monsters who rush around corridors waving claws about. And that's what they do in fairness. But I loved them and I drew them in books, and I used to use a green pen to colour in their eyes. I think the neon green of their eyes was an absolute master touch, and that really served to make them more interesting. Let's take a look at one appearing at the end of part 1. Yes! We don't get to see much of them in that cliffhanger, but I really like them. I mean, they're just monsters, aren't they? They're just your classic monster. They've got great big claws, and they'll rip you apart given half a chance. Who can say fairer than that? Let's move on to number 8, which is an altogether different kettle of death. What you're about to see is one of the most horrific and gruesome scenes within the realms of Doctor Who, a show for children, but this was really pushing the envelope. Let's have a look at these campers in the Stones of Blood. Don't. Oh, too late.
What's the matter?
My hand!
Look at that hand turns into skeleton. The screen literally turns red. And what's happening there is that this is the Ogre, a silicon-based life form that drinks people's blood like raspberry aid and can't get enough of it. The Ogre are absolutely amazing. I loved them as a kid. Again, I was drawing them because they were easy to draw. Pretty scary. There's another scene in which they smash through patio doors, and because they were smashing into a domestic setting, that felt all the scarier to me. Let's move on to number 7 and monsters that can speak. And they speak like this.
Silence.
The Nimon are just marvellous. Look at their lovely yellow horns, which once again I enjoyed drawing as a kid. This is a major factor actually, and it still is today obviously, the drawability of a monster for a child. And I love those horns, I love their eyes, and I like the way they moved. The production team employed dancers and put them in very high-heeled shoes. Even though it must have been hell for the actors, it does create a certain style of movement. And I love the voice. And I enjoy the story as well. You know, it's got an ever-changing labyrinth in it. That's always good value. Right, moving on to number 6.
The nucleus of the swarm.
What's interesting about this scene, the nucleus appears in a completely different form to how it will eventually appear. I've never really looked into whether there's some kind of production-based reason for this, like they changed their mind at the last minute and they didn't want this kind of blob with a claw and an eye and they wanted something different. But I love the fact that the nucleus appears in different ways. I think it's always great when scary monsters do that because it kind of gives them a second or third chance to scare you. A virus is an ever-changing beast. The nucleus is great. But I love the voice from John Leeson. That's kind of a huge part of what the nucleus is. Before we move on to the number 5, I'd like to remind you to subscribe if you haven't already. Now, number 5, take a look at these bad boys. You can't beat a robot lurching along a corridor with red eyes repeating the word kill over and over, can you? Their voices are so great. I mean, really, if you ask me in a different week, I'd probably put the Robots of Death at the top of this list. But at the same time, they're not true monsters, because the true villain in this story is somebody else who I won't reveal in case you have yet to watch the Robots of Death. So the robots stay at number 5, and let's move on to the notably slimy number 4 in this list. It's the Rutan from Horror of Fang Rock.
What are you doing in this part of the galaxy anyway?
That doesn't concern you. You are to be destroyed.
Simple as that. It doesn't concern you, you are to be destroyed. So the Rutan is a great big green blob, and in truth, it's at its most scary when it's possessing humans, and I think that monsters tend to be scariest when they are possessing people, and which is a lot cheaper in a special effects budget. But I do like this blob, a rare example of a Doctor getting to have a bit of a philosophical chat with a monster before blowing it up. Now, we're getting into some seriously scary one-off stuff here. Let's move on to number 3. Take a look at this, my friends.
My legs. I can't move my legs. Look. Look.
Again, I love that the Fendal takes different forms. We have this beastie wobbling along a hallway in a kind of a country house. I think they're great. And now we see the other form of the Fendal, which is the Fendal core. Now, I don't quite understand what this is, but basically this lovely scientist, Thea Ransom, is being transformed into it. Look at those eyes, painted on eyes, but they scared the hell out of me as a kid. And just the Fendal itself is really creepy and abstract and very H.P. Lovecraft, and the Doctor describes it as being the personification of death itself or something similar, and that's why the Fendal have a special place in my heart, even though the Fendal never speaks in any way. I don't think even the Fendal core utters a single word. Love them. Now, the top 2 monsters in this list are both more humanoid monsters, and they both can speak. Let's get into it. Number 2. Yeah, look at this beast. That's just classic. I mean, Morbius just looks brilliant. Let's just get another look at him. Look at the state of him there with his 2 eyes on sticks and his kind of fishbowl head. He's a direct Frankenstein analogy, really. That's what the brain of Morbius is all about, because Professor Solon pieces him together from parts of different aliens. And Morbius is a Time Lord, which seems to elevate him as a monster to a whole new level. He's a Time Lord in a monster's body, which is a really interesting concept. So much fun. I love the voice as well. We didn't get to hear him speak then, but he has a similar kind of crackly kind of voice to the Rutan. So who is at number 1? And in fact, it's not just one person, but 2 people who are just, in my mind, inseparable. As David Brent might say, these 2 are just... That really cuts off quickly at the end there. That cliffhanger made quite an impression on me. That's the first time we see his mangled face. So Magnus Greel is just, he has so many different names, and he just feels like the personification of evil, really. His former name is the Butcher of Brisbane, or his nickname rather. He's a war criminal from the 51st century, which always sounds great to me. The 51st century. And I love that he has this amazingly rich backstory. He's just a really scary, nasty person. He has just about the most frightening and intimidating henchman you could possibly have. Mr. Sin.
Professor!
Look at the absolute state of him. He's basically a robot with a pig's brain inside him, which is always a great combination, isn't it? So Magnus Greel and Mr. Sin are just 2 of Doctor Who's most memorable creations of all time, and they certainly deserved more than just a single serving. But at least they get to win this list and sit right at the top of it. Let me know if you agree down in comments. Next up on this channel, you'll find this video relevant to your interests, and if you're a happy Doctor Who fan who just wants to hang out and geek out without getting trolled, you might want to consider my new online community there. Thanks so much for watching, and never forget who you are.